don't care.
Hi, Darlene. Okay.
Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
Then I have
Of course, whatever you need to do. We've got a quorum. Yeah. Being 6:30, let's call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Here.
Mrs. Rogers?
Here.
Mr. Roach? Mrs. Barney?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Durick?
Here.
Solicitor Nicholas?
Here.
Mr. Lennon?
Here.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the July 16th, 2024 minutes. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach? Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, this evening, Mr. Turnley's with us to present our 2023 audit findings. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, do we have a mic?
Let me find out. See if it's there.
Jack is here. Yeah, if you just give us 1 minute, if that.
He'd probably hear you anyway.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Jack.
There we go.
Thank you.
Board members, thanks for having me here this evening. Just wanted to, if I can, briefly go over the results of the audit of the authority for calendar year 23. What I've put in front of you this evening is you have the thick copy of the audit report, but inside the copy of the audit report, there's a letter dated for July 9th. You know you'll have the right piece of correspondence is because halfway down it says net position analysis. Just a couple comment, and that's the document, by the way, that I'll be focusing on with regard to what I need to share with you this evening. But just a couple quick comments, important comments about the actual thick audit report itself. There are two. The most important section, in our opinion, is the independent auditor's opinion. This year, we've issued what is known as an unmodified opinion, similar to what we have given in past years. And what an unmodified opinion means in our profession is that the information contained in the body of the audit report is presented in conformity with the rules and regulations of our profession, and there are no departures from that. In the old days, we used to call that a clean opinion. So, as I always tell my board members, that's the type of opinion you want to have for the report to go out to any funding agency or third party that needs to have a copy of it. So that's a good thing. This year, there's two components to the audit. There's the regular audit that I do each year, but this year, because of your PennVest funding, which is considered federal monies, we have to do a compliance audit in conformity with the rules of PennVest with regard to spending their money. And there's a section in the back of the audit report that talks about our internal control testing and other things that we did related to that PennVest program. But in a nutshell, what it basically says that we didn't find any issues of non-compliance related to the authority's handling and spending of those PennVest funds. So in other words, that's good. That's what PennVest wants to see when they get a copy of that audit report, of course. Now, to dig down into the numbers, that short synopsis that I gave you, David, we'll just take a look at some of those numbers. And if you have questions as I go along, I like to always give the board a history so they can see where they're at and where they're at today. And so 5-year history of your net position. What the net position is basically, if you think about it, it's total assets minus all your liabilities. What do we have left? And what we have left is not only cash, liquid monies, but it's also the structure, the SOAR plant itself. So some of that is the money that you borrowed over the years and put into the plant. It's not spendable, of course, it's not liquid, but nevertheless, it is part of the overall what's left over net position. So you can see a 5-year history of that. Most recently, this year, an increase of almost 7%, that final line. So underneath that 7%, I just tell the board members the three of the main reasons for that increase, that significant increase, as you can see, $500,000 capital contribution toward the Lawrence project, as you expected, an increase in interest earnings of about $316,000. All my presentations this year, to whether it's my municipalities, my authorities, or my school districts, had significant increases in their interest earnings for calendar year 2023. And then just an increase in overall residential and commercial sewer fees of about $416,000. So if you're looking for reasons, Mark, why did that go up so much? Those are three of the main reasons for that increase. When you turn to the top of page 2, another table, as I was telling you, your net position consists not only of liquid funds, but also of non-liquid funds, mainly your sewer infrastructure. And I give you a 5-year history of the unrestricted portion only, not the portion that has anything to do with your fixed asset, your sewer infrastructure. So naturally, as the sewer infrastructure increases, which it did in 23, you got the additional Penvest monies, so you put more money into the Lawrence project. That capital asset, your fixed asset portion of net position increased, but you used more funds, of course, more liquid funds to make that happen, in addition to the Penvest borrowing. So naturally, the unrestricted portion is going to go down. But keep in mind, your overall net position increased by almost 7%, as I said on the first page. So I just wanted you to be aware there's a couple components of that net position that I'm bringing to your attention. At the bottom of page 2, a lot of information, but this is summary totals again for the board to look at. Your operating revenues over the last 5 years, operating expenses, and then after that, that's where you derive your net operating income. And you can see it increased this year about $250,000, over $250,000 in net operations. Then after that, to a smaller degree, some non-operating monies, bond interest expense, Penvest interest expense, offset by interest earnings. And then the big capital contribution sticks out like a sore thumb, the $500,000. And we arrived back at the net income I talked about at the beginning, $1.8 million, as compared to last year, $797,000. And we discussed the 3 reasons on page 1 why that went up as it did. When you turn to page 3, these are important ratios that I give the board each year that are more important for an authority-type governmental agency, which you are, than other types of organizations. So it's what's called an operating ratio, current ratio, and debt-to-asset ratio. And I'm sorry to just inundate you with these numbers and percentages, but these are actually important to know. The operating ratio, that tells you the lesser that percentage, the best way to look at it, the lesser that first column, you see 23, it went down from last year, so you're thinking, well, why did it go down? Going down is a good thing. So what that tells you is you have more operating revenues to cover operating expenses. And that's what you want. That's what you want. You want that ratio to go down on an annual basis. The current ratio basically says how much liquid monies do we have, nothing to do with your buildings and infrastructure, how much liquid monies, cash and short-term receivables do we have to pay our liquid bills that are due within a 60-day period of time. And the higher that goes, the better it is for you. And you can see it has increased over the last 5 years. This year, cash increased about $313,000. There's a schedule in the audit report. If you look at it in depth, you'll see there's a cash flow statement that shows that cash increased, and that's reflected here in the current ratio, 16.3. And then debt to total assets, you can see that increased. And of course, with the new Penvest monies, at the end of 2023, you had drawn down almost $5.8 million. At that particular time, of course, it's more by now. But at the end of December, it was that. So that percentage of debt to total assets is obviously going to increase, and it did. So all of these ratios lined up. You know, when we start the audit, we do some preliminary projections of what we think these ratios are going to be, and then if they come into play as we think they're going to be, that gives us a greater level of comfort that the numbers look good. And these ratios did come in line with what we had, our early projections based on the numbers we were seeing, and they all made sense. Everything that I told you, there are reasons for that. There's 3 reasons for the increase in revenues, the increased debt, things of that nature. It all made sense, and these ratios said the same thing to me as well. And then other matters are just comments that I make each year to a lot of my clients about the importance of segregation of duties in the business office. It's not as if you have a major corporation and you have 5 or 6 people in the business office handling accounts payable alone. It's not like that in any of my governmental organizations. So that puts more of a burden on the members of the board to, when you get your financial information on a monthly basis, to to look at it closely and make sure everything appears reasonable to you as board members. You know, it's another set of eyes on the operations, the financial operations of the authority. And on the last page, I talk about cybersecurity training. Our profession is pushing us this year, the auditors, to mention to our boards the importance of receiving some sort of cybersecurity training. Believe me, I am not a cybersecurity person. We all know that it exists. We hear fraud that occurs and problems that people have. But our profession is saying that, you know, in the past, you would rely on either third-party IT folks that you bring in to help you with any issues with your computer, or if you have somebody with that expertise internally. But what's happening now is, and what our profession is recommending, is that for the folks that handle the money and are responsible for the approving of transactions and things of that nature, namely Shannon and Mike, that they receive on an annual basis some sort of cybersecurity training to have them, be able to look out closer. If they're looking at their computer, they receive emails. You could receive fraudulent emails. They look so real these days. They look as if they're one of your vendors requesting a payment, things of that nature. May not be applicable, but you never know what the future holds. So you want to be able to at least have some sort of knowledge to identify problems that may pop up in your system to alert you to issues that you may have. And that could also apply to your plant managers as well, because you could imagine the problems you'd have if something happened, the system shut down, and somebody was trying to get into your system. So, and I know there's training out there. It's available, and you can, it's like an hour worth of training, and they just tip you off to they don't make you a cybersecurity expert, but they give you some tips on what to look out for that are things that you never thought about in the past, but as soon as they tell you, you'll go, geez, that sounds so common sense, but it's helpful. So other than that, sorry to prolong with all the numbers and percentages, but I wanted to touch on the highlights as best most as possible, and if you have any questions at this point, I'll be more than happy to answer them if I can.
Thank you. Very succinct, I think. Any questions for Mark tonight?
Do you do this for other authorities?
Oh, yeah.
Is there ever an establishment of a baseline or how we're comparing with others? Like, are we ever consider, like, how are we doing this compared to other communities?
There's sites that you can go to, like ratios. If you Google ratios for authorities, a lot of those authorities are some of the big authorities, citywide authorities, and it's hard to compare the Cecil Township Municipal Authority to them and their operating ratios and their current ratios. But when I do look at it, you look good in comparison to those.
Okay.
But you have to consider they have significant debt, so their situations may be a little bit different than yours, and significant assets, of course. But liquidity is important. That current ratio I was talking about, and talked about yours being 16%. That's good. That's good for you. So you're managing, in my opinion, it appears that you're managing your funds well and growing your net position, at least over the years that I've been doing your audit.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
One step beyond, we are now prepared, once the audit is done, to publish what we need to, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, we are.
okay. Okay,
I didn't advertise it, Aaron, until Mr. Turnley came out and gave the presentation. This way, if there were any questions, you guys could ask, and everything would be good.
okay,
So,
very good, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the engineer's report. Mr. Lennon.
Okay, go to monthly report. Under the Village of Lawrence, the collection system contract, so they are still working on punch lists. We did have a meeting with them last week. It's been slow going on, I guess, some of the grass restoration, so we're gonna stay on them. I know Mike's been staying on them too, with all the complaints about grass. They're working on the concrete driveway restoration. They started work on that. That's something that's been lingering out there. But again, all the sewer line installation work's complete. The only other item is there's a camera inspection inside the sewers they need to do just to confirm the final sewer installations. And they're trying to get a subcontractor lined up for that, and they should be moving towards closeout once they complete all those punch list items, but until they finish that, we wouldn't recommend that. On the agenda, we do have a change order number 3. That is for the additional roadway restoration. Now, if you recall, the contract was just trench restoration because of Penvest, but after some of the roadways that did not hold up, mainly the alleys, it was the extra pavement to take care of those alleys. That way, we're done with the roads for the township. So, and that's on the agenda. We'll go back to that. So we did complete that. Under the wastewater plant contract, a couple items. We met with the contractor this morning. I do have the description of what's been completed in the last month, but some updates on schedule. West Penn Power, they're out there working on Georgetown Road, installing utility poles. If you recall, last month, that was one of the questionable items when they were gonna come out. There was a discussion on easements for their work, and they confirmed that the easements that are in place are adequate. So we don't have to do any additional easement work, so that's good. So working with the contractor on some of those electrical changes, they'll have some field electrical changes on the site that I assume they're gonna ask for a change order for those costs, so.
Okay.
So note, and then they did discuss today on the time extension. They're waiting to hear a date from West Penn Power, if we hear this week, of when power will be available. Then they want to submit a formal request for change order based on the schedule we reviewed, I believe, 2 or 3 months ago here. If they don't receive that from West Penn Power, we'd recommend proceeding with the schedule they already had previously submitted with showing that time extension. It's just, it'll be up in the air for West Penn Power if they don't meet that schedule or not, so, and that's, I guess, a little
What
out
was
of
that
their control.
extension, like 90 days?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it was for startup in December, and I think we were, well, that was just for the plant. Then for Teodori outfit, that's going to the next year, so actually, it's probably closer to 6 to 8 months for the entire contract,
okay,
just for that final plant, the old plant demolition outfit of the new pump station. So no action required tonight. We do have a pay request on the agenda, payment request number 14 that we do recommend, in the amount of $529,048.14. And likewise, we also do have Penvest payment request number 15 in the amount of $554,797.02 for payment requisition. We do recommend approval of that when you get to that on the agenda. Under developments, if you flip to page 3, I guess no updates on developments in the last month. We have not received a resubmittal I'm aware of. We're waiting on Silver Creek resubmittal and the pickleball facility. That was the last submittal we got, and we discussed that at the last meeting, so. Mount Pleasant sewer system. So we did meet with the Mount Pleasant sewer engineer to discuss potential project for a sewer line extension to the Miller's Run system. They received I can't remember how much the grant was, Mike, was it?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were trying to get a grant for the whole project, which was in the millions of dollars. But this area is in desperate need of sewer. It's kind of like Lawrence. There's a lot of failing on-lot systems. And the problem is the way it looks like what they're going to have to do. It's a lot of cutting across country and different things like that. So they were looking at the possible option of, if they could send it to us. So the first thing was just meet with them, see if it's beneficial. One of the big things is it'll add at least 100 customers from them. But again, we'd have to take a look at what the zoning is along 50 and see how many residents of our own could be served with this to see if it is something worthwhile. Because again, if there's commercial development in there and we, can provide that, that can open up some growth as far as that goes. So it's just, we need more information, kind of was just a preliminary meeting to see what they were looking for.
What
And
do you
I'd
expect
also-
that timeline would be for us to know something, have
Well, I
decide?
think if the board's interested, we would start meeting with them on a regular basis and start looking at, I guess, feasibility. So, and the other thing I'd note too, the Mount Pleasant system also includes a portion of the township, I think it's called Southview, that would get service, and I guess they're part of the area that was with bad sewer service. It was Southview, and then there was another road that was over the township line, but it was primary, their focus is, can we get sewer to these customers? Because their overall project, they have cost issues.
Okay.
So I guess the next step, if the board's interested, we could start to have more discussions with them and work up some feasibility costs and see if it's feasible to proceed, and to see what it would take to implement, so.
Okay. Anything else?
Grants, the only thing I had at the bottom, so 2024 LSA statewide grants, they're opening September 1st with a November 30th deadline, so I'll talk to Mike about different ones. There's a $100 application fee, but LSA you can use for just about anything, so repairing a building, buying a truck, doing a sewer project, repairing a plant, repairing a lift station, all that type of stuff would apply, replace a roof. So it's a good grant program. It's the state gaming fund.
Okay.
What about this facility review and capital project planning component that was in their notes?
That's on hold. I know, I think some of the board members had planned to review the facilities before we discuss it, and maybe have that as a 2025 budget item that we could proceed on. But once we're authorized, we do a walkthrough and do a 25-year capital project plan of all your facilities, of what your needs are, and project it out, so.
We actually need to set a date rather than saying, oh yeah, we're going to take a Friday and go do that. We need to put that on the calendar.
Yep. And I think we gave the cost, so we can have it in the budget for next year if you want to proceed, so.
Okay.
Yep. Last item, we're working on the annual report for 2023. Now that we have the audit, we'll get that prepared, get that finalized.
Great. Great, thank you. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve change order number 3 in the amount of $66,835.54 for contract number 2017-06, rebid construction of sanitary sewers and appurtenances?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Do I hear a motion to approve partial payment number 14 in the amount of $529,048.14 for contract number 21-STP1, rebid Village of Lawrence Sewage Treatment Plant?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
For Penvest payment requisition, do I hear a motion to approve payment number 15 in the amount of $554,797.02?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. On to Mr. Nicholas for the solicitor's report.
Okay, thank you. Other than what our manager may cover and what the engineer has touched on, I only have one other matter for public comment, and that's on the pending CHJA litigation. We have the deposition of the Cannonsburg Borough manager set for September 3rd, and 2 weeks later, we'll have the deposition of another audit representative on the pension aspect of the litigation. And also, frankly, to our surprise, Cannonsburg asked for another mediation. They did not want to mediate in front of the previous mediator, and we have agreed on former federal judge Kenneth Benson, who's received the accolades from both the plaintiff and the defense bar. And right now, Judge Benson is considering dates a couple of months hence for mediation. And I'll keep the board advised as we get closer to that. Recall that the last time we mediated, that was through the court's direction and still through the court's direction, but that was when there was the possibility of a pending sale of CHJA. That's not at issue now, but CHJA has asked that we consider another mediation, and we're on track to do that. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, business managers report. Mr. Erg.
All right, your packets have the financial reports for June 2024. Any questions on those? Nope. A debt service payment for the series of 2016 bonds was due on August 15th. I made the payment on August 5th in the amount of $66,012.60. I also included a copy of that transaction in your packets. I also have a letter that needs to be signed tonight for M&T Bank stating that there are no funds available to be transferred to the authority's capital improvement and redemption fund after this debt service payment was made. And there's a motion on the agenda for that.
Okay. Is that all we have tonight?
And that's it for me.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to authorize letter to M&T Trust Company in regard to capital improvements and redemption fund transfers?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Zrencheck, authority manager's report, please.
Thank you, Chairperson Barnes. This evening, under old business, NPSD permit renewals, we finally have received the permit, the draft permit for the Miller's Run treatment plant. We got the draft copy. I have forwarded a copy over to LSSE for comment. We posted what was required for public comment down at the treatment plant. So hopefully, if there's nothing, we have 30 days for public comment. Hopefully, there's nothing in the permit that we have to comment on. They did change, they added one thing to the permit, which is E. coli testing, but it's only annually for report and monitoring. They removed for total nitrogen and total phosphorus. We used to have to test 4 times a year. They've reduced that to 1 time a year. And then they've reduced a couple other things, but there's really no major changes that would affect the operation, so that's a good thing. So now we just have to wait to make sure that, you know, during the public comment period, we get through that, and we'll go from there. Other than that, I'll be waiting to hear on the Teodori and the Cherry Brook, but it looks like it'll probably take close to a year before we did that, because that's kind of how the Miller's Run permit, I sent that in on the 3rd of August 2023, and we finally received it on the 13th of August 2024. So, but that's where we're at. Silver Creek Development, they have addressed all the technical comments, but they did ask for consideration for the piping to be used on the project. They did provide us with a plan. Larry, you should have a copy of that. If not, I'll forward it to you again. And then we can give the board a recommendation on what they're asking for. Gerber Collision, there is no change on that. We sent a comment letter back, and that was the end of what we've heard from the developer. Item 4, LNS Wastewater, they've contacted the authority about the possibility of acquiring the treatment plant and collection system known as the Monaco plan. I had sent them over a letter with information required to see if this was a feasibility study, to see if the authority could consider doing this. The authority that I requested has been received, and they also sent me a copy of their current permit that was renewed. So the information will be reviewed. If I have any questions on certain things, I can forward it on to LSSE, but hopefully next month I will be able to get through that and provide the board an update on that. Item 5, number 2 pump at Miller's Run Pump Station. We have that out for repairs. I called to check on that. It's getting close, but since it's a 60 horsepower pump, it takes a little bit of time for them to rebuild. Property at 19 Mayview Road is being subdivided into 2 parcels. They got through the subdivision portion of it. They did send over a letter last month for the sewage flows for the planning module. Those were some updated numbers. I sent that over to LSSE to review. Once they get through those numbers and they get that back to me, I can start working on the sections of the planning module that are required by the authority so they can move forward with that project. Item number 7, update on the road name consideration request for Klinger Road Pump Station. I did a little bit more research. I was able to find the file, but after the meeting last month, Walt had called me just to say that that was done years ago, that there was an easement done for ingress and egress for the property owner, but there is a caveat to that. That roadway is able to be opened. If the township would ever decide to open that all the way through past the pump station, that road reverts to the township. So basically, it looks like from what he had told me, the request would have to come from the township to approve that.
Yeah. I think we thought that anyway.
Right. But I wanted to do my due diligence, and I did bring the agreement. I found the file with the couple of different easements, because I know they went back and forth when the one property owner that built the house off of that access road wanted a few different things, so they went back and forth on that. But that's ultimately what happens is if that road would ever be opened up, it's not the authorities, it reverts to the township. So that's where we're at with that. Item number 8, Larry touched on about the Mount Pleasant Township. So we're looking into that information, and then we can have some more feedback for the board. Item number 9, I reported that PennDOT contacted me about the maintenance bond that the authority has on Georgetown Road for the Lawrence project. They were supposed to go out and do some marking and then let me know what was damaged and what would be considered the authority's responsibility. I have not heard anything back, so I'm going to follow up with him to see. I've traveled over there a couple of times. I do not see anything that was marked out, so I'm going to see maybe he just hasn't got to it yet. So I'll look into that, but it's for right now, no change. Last month, we did mention about the server, that it is 5 to 7 years old. I know, Aaron, you had asked about if it can go completely cloud-based, and our IT provider still isn't 100% sold on going 100% cloud, but the server is getting up there in age. But that would be the cost, is $3,407. It would be a little bit less because the quote he provided reflects tax, and we're tax exempt. So that's just something that I wanted to throw out there again so everybody is aware. Item number,
That's an administrative, it's in the budget.
Okay.
You know, no approval needed.
all right. Miller's Run wastewater treatment plant tank and building lighting was not working. I investigated a little bit more, and we determined that it's a combination of burnout bulbs, fixture failure, and photo sensors. So I'm going to work on some pricing to see what is necessary to make the repairs. I'm probably thinking that some of the fixtures that are the sodium halide bulbs, it would be worthwhile looking to see if we convert those fixtures to LED, because it would be a big cost savings, because those bulbs are going to be harder and harder to get. So I'll have something for the September meeting. Item 1 under new business, there is a credit for 1501 Route 80 water leak. I sent over in everybody's packet the memo that I put together based on the water leak. The gentleman had sent in his information. So when I reviewed this, the water leak was a water leak. Nothing did get into the sewer system, but because it was so hard to see what the exact amount is, how we've done these leaks in the past is we find the credit we find what their usage was for the 2023 calendar year. So we find the highest monthly usage, which was 5,900 gallons. So we multiply that by 4 to come up with 23,600 gallons. That would be the maximum. It would be treated in a 4-month period. Then we go ahead and determine the calculation. So he had an $844.90 credit. Pennsylvania American already made $172.55 adjustment as a one-time courtesy. So the remaining credit for this gentleman would be $672.35. So, based on everything he sent over, there was a letter from the plumber, he sent pictures, there's good documentation. I'm comfortable with recommending the credit be issued. All right. Item number 2 is the renewal of the insurance policy for the Cecil Township Municipal Authority. That's for the buildings, the trucks, equipment, all of that. Workman's comp. It remains somewhat flat. The only area that it did go up is on the workman's comp portion of it. There was a slight increase due to some previous claims, and that Pennsylvania, the mod went up from 1.038 to 2.89, and that's a 24% increase. But that is something that I can't control. It's due to past claims. So that's where it came off. They did a 5-year run loss. So a couple of those claims are older, so they should be coming off, so that may drop back down in the following years. But it stayed relatively flat, so I recommend the renewal of the policy. Item number 3, motor for number 1 blower Teodori had failed. I ordered a replacement motor at a cost of $1,562.21, and that includes freight. The motor came in, it's installed, and we are now operational again. Once that plant goes offline, that motor is a common size that we can use somewhere else, so it's not like it was limping along. The only thing that was ironic about this is when I first started as manager in August of '22, I ordered this exact same mower for number 2 pump. It was $1,680 plus shipping. So it actually went down 2 years later, which is kind of strange that we saw a decrease. Normally everything goes up, but I was pleased that we actually saved a couple $100. A computer and a monitor are needed for the receptionist area once the customer service position is filled. The cost for that is $724.02. We actually can get away without the monitor because we have a spare, so it would actually reduce that to $659. So I do recommend, making that purchase.
Yep.
And then I'll give you a quick update on the funding available for the Lawrence Sewer Project connection. I know some residents had said they had reached out to the USDA program because there was something available. So I looked into that a little bit, and you can actually go onto the USDA's website, and it tells you to punch in your address to see if you are eligible for anything there. When you punch in the addresses over in Lawrence, they all come up and say this project is ineligible for funding. So I have to reach out to the USDA and see if maybe that their website hasn't been adjusted or something going on there. But so far, it doesn't look like that's going to be a funding source. So it looks like the Penvest one that we've recommended is the one that's, Larry?
So I did talk to USDA. When you look at Cecil Township, they delineated based on Interstate 79, putting the east of 79 as ineligible, the west of 79 as being eligible for whatever their rural requirement is. So I asked them, like, how, half the township's eligible, why not this project? But it is what it is pretty much what I was told.
I wonder if that, can be appealed in any way.
Yeah, it's based on, he told me the 2020 census, that the new census might update that. But you'd have to wait for that update.
Timing will be
Timing
poor.
is, right.
That, the Penvest option was the low-cost interest.
Right, yeah.
And that didn't have an early payment penalty, right? So if that was the route that the citizen wanted to go for now, and then maybe if we could get this eligibility turned around,
Right.
they could get that grant and pay off their loan.
Yeah, the Penvest program, I did bring the little flyer for it. The terms are a fixed interest rate for the life of the loan, and as of the first of the year, it was as low as 1.75%, and it was up to 20 years to repay the balance on the loan. And they gave some sample payments. If you made a $15,000 loan, it would be $75 monthly. If you did a $25,000 loan, it would be $124 monthly. So that, they just gave some numbers, but I don't know what the current rates are, but that was as of 1/1/24.
And that could be used for both tap-in and,
It says repairs or replacement of existing connection to public sewer or an individual on-lot storage system, connect a existing home for the first time to a public sewer. So it pays for design, construction permit, and other related municipal costs.
okay,
So.
good. All right, and that's the pamphlet that you gave out when we had. We do need to probably discuss another town hall and get that on
Yes,
calendar
because
as well.
Yes, because we have residents, they watched the last meeting, and there were some questions on talking about the early tap-in for some of the section that's gravity. Their concern is if they're forced to tap in, there's other residents that they got together with a group. They have a contractor, so some of the residents are in the area that we have the early tap in, and then there's residents in the other area that have to wait until the plant comes online. So they're asking how we were going to handle that. And, my suggestion was reach out to the contractor and see if, he can take a look at that. They can always buy the materials, so the material cost doesn't escalate. Have the materials there, and then they can do it together. But again, it's a matter of, there is some concern there, but I think we need to have the town hall meeting to discuss, to let them know, because we're getting close. It's going to be here before we know it, so they can know what's expected of them, how much the tie-in's going to be. I did speak to Walt about that as well. On the Miller's Run project, once the plant was up online and ready to go, 60 days is what they had to tie in. So that's all it was. So, and I did a little bit of research. I did find a couple letters, and it does say within 60 days, and I think that follows in line with the township ordinance. But this is all stuff that I'd like to have prepared for the town hall meeting, as well as some guidance from the Washington County Sanitary Council on how to dispose of the existing septic tanks, if they're going to be disposed of proper, because those are all going to be questions that come up.
Right.
Do we have any pre-qualifications for who does this tapping? Like, how did we leave it? Do we have Ts that are already in place to connect to? So it's not like they're cutting into our pipe, but do we have any pre-quals requirements, or can anybody do this work? How are we handling that? Is there any stipulations? Are we having bonding issues or concerns, or, we don't want people out there, at midnight and digging with a back. I don't know.
We haven't discussed that. It has, the other thing we have to talk about is inspection.
I think, and I have to reach out to Walt on that, from what we had talked the one time early on in this project, they brought in a third-party inspector to do the tap-ins because there were so many, it would have overwhelmed the township. So basically, before they can do the final tap, the connection from the house, they're going to have to do the air test, whatever the township requires. So I don't think they're going to just be able to tie in the middle of the night, because it's going to have to be inspected.
Right.
So, but it's just, we have to figure out if we're going to use a third-party inspector, and I'll have to go back through the records and see who we used, if they're still available.
Yeah, Aaron, I was thinking also, as you're speaking, it's been a while since we've done that Miller's Run, but we should probably make sure our resolution that is in place is in keeping with whatever exists with the township and with whatever the engineer is recommending. So we can look at that with you.
Do we have a typical detail on backfilling and things? Is there something that's provided to give them some guidance, so we, trying to protect our pipe and our infrastructure from damage or twist, or if someone does something
You do have standard details, yeah.
that's available for them? Okay.
Yes.
And on that subject, we had talked, we haven't gotten down the road on it yet, but was revisiting some of those standards and rules and regulations that we have, because ours haven't been looked at, in a while. So that's something that I know the board looked favorably upon, and, realistically, with as much as is going on with Lawrence, that's kind of taken a back burner. But that's something that we should probably, get on with earnest in the months ahead, that's all.
Right, right. So I need to understand the timeline and when best it would be to have this town hall so we can schedule it out and obviously publicize it on our webpage. But will we have that date before next month's meeting? Should we have it already set by then? Just trying to gauge the timeline and when people are.
I'm
need these
probably thinking it would be good. Larry, what do you think? Should it be before the meeting or after the meeting next month?
Do before the meeting, yeah.
So it'd be sometime after Labor Day, sometime in that time frame, if we can get something available.
Okay,
Because it'll be here before you know it, it'll be time to,
Say that's not a lot of time.
it's not, and I'll be out until the week of the 15th or,
we can always do it after the meeting. I mean, if we need a little bit more time, that's fine. That'll give us a little bit more time to prepare.
The fourth week of the month's pretty open for me, so if we want to pick a date, the fourth
Then
week of
let's-
September, and
yeah.
Yeah,
Or
Monday's the only busy
Thursday
one.
of the week of our meeting, so that it's announced one more time here at the meeting, plus it's publicized on our website, and try to go for that date.
Well, once we have a date for the hall, if it's available, I can start advertising that as soon as possible to get it out there.
Okay,
And we can even send letters if we have to, whatever we have to do to get it out there.
okay. All right, we can make that happen. Anything else, Mike, other than the motions?
That's it.
Okay. Okay, do I hear a motion to authorize renewal of the insurance policy for Cecil Township Municipal Authority?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Do I hear, excuse me, a motion to authorize approval of credit for 1501 Route 980 water leak in the amount of $672.35?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Any correspondence?
No.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve payment of expenses, transfers of funds, et cetera, for payment of invoices, employee payroll, 941 tax, et cetera. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Any comments from the floor? We were hoping. Okay.
Maybe one quick question. When is Part B? Did we get money? I'm calling it Part B. After they main installation of the sewage plant, there was another area that we were gonna go and later on get money for. Houses down below.
That is considered Part 2 of the Lawrence project. We have applied with the LSA grant. We've been pursuing other options to try to get funding for that. So far, nothing to date, but we are still working on that.
Okay. Do I have a motion, or I will make a motion for executive session for personnel matters and litigation? We don't need a roll call vote for that, do we?
Just need a second.
No, we're
Yeah.
just,
You do need a motion to go into executive session.
oh, we do,
Okay, you made the
okay.
motion.
I
I'll
made the
second
motion. Okay, roll call vote then, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Okay, going into session at 7:17. Thank you. Any updates sitting there?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
Right now, Houston, we got penalized by the court of sanction for not showing up to things. And the judge has decided he is not going to allow Houston to present any documentary or testimonial evidence at trial. So we've got them painted in court. It remains to be seen.
Okay, but real quick, if we win something, we don't get no money.
Yeah, theoretically, that money would go to
Yeah, right.
us through a mediator. Remains to be seen.
All right, I meant to ask you about that, not about, thanks.
You don't need me in there, right? No. Okay.
I was gonna ask you about part B.
Yeah.
Money was, gotta be careful when I say this, but I thought people were really positive that we were gonna get extra money for that.
Yeah. We've been submitting to the state too.
I'm so far back that I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. I was just wondering if they had money lined up. Everything with your business, good?
Good, busy.
I was actually gonna ask if I could do my pile before the meeting started.
That sounds good.
Okay, coming out of executive session at 7:29. Make a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Roll call vote?
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.